evening and being a part, of course, of the worship service and also encouraging everybody by your presence as well. Appreciate that very much. Hebrews chapter 11 is something we all know very well. The hall of faith, if you will, is what we call it, where over and over again by faith, and then whoever it is did something amazing, was able to overcome a lot, or simply was faithful to the Lord. And then that goes into, of course, Hebrews chapter 12, saying, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, or in this case, clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And so first of all, I want to look at that first part and think about the word inspiration. And I want to encourage you, I think we probably all have people in our life that have inspired us to maybe obey the gospel, to do better in our life, inspired us, hopefully, to be faithful to the Lord. And I want to encourage you to think about those people as much as you possibly can. A lot of the ones, I know a lot of people have inspired me in my life, but most of the ones that I think of often have passed on now, and yet I think about them all the time. My granddad, Earl Richardson, being one of them, being one of my mentors, and being my granddad and a preacher from 18 to about 90 years of age. And I looked up to him so much, and he inspired me in a lot of ways. Mike Nix being another one that preached, of course, at the Midway Church of Christ, and then eventually at the Beltline Church of Christ. But they inspired me a lot. So think about those people that inspire you, as he's saying that we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Thinking about all those great people that give you inspiration to be faithful to the Lord is basically what he's talking about there. But I love the way that he explains it there, gives that illustration of a race, the race that is set before us. I like that. I like a good example, a good illustration, because that way I can understand it a little bit better. And we all know what it's like to race. We might have to go back to our childhood to think about that, but PE days. But I also think about our children. Carson and Luke both did cross country, and Luke did track as well. And we would go, and I don't know if y'all have ever been to a cross country meet, but man, there are thousands upon thousands. I mean, people absolutely love that. And anyway, we used to go to those all over the place. And the ones that were public, they would run in some public races, 4Ks or whatever, where other people were running along with the school. And always remember that there were always, and it's usually older guys, but man, they were serious as they could be, and they would be just as trim and fit as could be. But one of the things that stood out about them that was almost a little creepy, I don't know, is that they wore next to nothing. They didn't have hardly anything on. They would have no shirt on. They would be shirtless, and then they would have shorts that just barely covered what it absolutely had to cover, and they would be just as thin as could be. Now, why did they do that? For the very reason of what we're talking about here. If you look at that, let us lay aside everything that would hold us back. When you run the race, you lay aside, you want to be as light as possible, right? To run that race, to be able to finish that race. Well, the same idea with our Christian walk is to lay aside everything that would ensnare us, that would, as he says, cling closely to us, that would basically hold us back from being faithful and being a productive child of God. So that is really what we're looking at as we begin a little short series on our evening service beginning tonight, and this is only going to be 3 or 4 Sunday nights, but I want to think about those sins that we need to lay aside, and obviously that's every sin, any sin that we have in our life. But why I'm doing this is because I really want to focus in on and talk a little bit about what we would consider to be small sins, because the small sin is what's going to get you. The big sin, not so often, and I realize all sin is falling short of the glory of God, separates us from God, and it's all bad, but we understand that there's big sin with bigger consequences and then small sin, and it's the small sin that'll get us because we really don't think that much about it, because just that, we do think that it is smaller than the big sin. And so we're going to talk about a few of those in the next 3 or 4 weeks. The first one is control. Can the need for control be sinful? Yes, it can. So this coincides with what we talked about this morning. Does anybody have the need for control? Don't raise your hand, and don't raise the hand of the person sitting next to you. And don't look too much and too long at them. But we do. I think everybody has a little bit of this anyway. And it's interesting to me to see over the years that the different aspects of this and how people are different when it comes to this. Some people are very, very controlling at work, and then they come home and they're not, and there's others that's the vice versa, and they are very controlling at home but not so much at work. But I think that we all deal with this some. This is the control freak verse, if you will, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. So the idea there is not trusting in self, releasing some of that control, trusting in the Lord. Two main areas I believe that we try to take control of our life, and that is, the first one is people. A lot of times we try to control people in some way or another. We all probably know people in our life that we love them dearly, but they're a little rough around the edges. And so we try to smooth out those edges a little bit, and we've got great plans for their lives. And so we try, and a lot of times we don't even really realize what we're doing, but a lot of times we try to manipulate them in some way or another. I've seen this a lot with families. I've seen this a lot even with brethren. And we mean well oftentimes by it, but we think we know what's best for that person, whoever it is, and we see what they can be or what really we want them to be, and we have a way to manipulate them to try to bring about that in their life. Goes back to, of course, just trying to control them. So we end up doing this sometimes by guilting people. Oftentimes it's done in that way, and trying to make decisions for them. We do this with co-workers, with children, with our spouses, with friends, and with brethren. A second way that we sometimes try to take control is circumstances. Whether that be future circumstances, the way people feel about me, which you have absolutely no control over, schedules, things of that nature. So feeling like I've got to have control over the way that things happen in my life or people and circumstances in my life. I looked at this past week. I think ego is the main culprit, if you will, of dealing with control issues. And I saw this and never thought about this before. Someone says it stands for ego edging God out. You know, trying to take control. And the more that we want control, the more we feel like we have to have control. And the more that we feel like we're losing control, the more we try to regain control. And it's kind of a vicious cycle. And so I want to look at some control gone wrong, if you will, in the book of Genesis. Turn to Genesis chapter 12. We're going to look at Abraham and Sarah tonight. In both cases, just look at two different examples of Abraham and Sarah and them trying to control things in their life that they should have stepped back and just simply let God have the control, and the negative consequences that came about because of this. Genesis chapter 12, beginning with verse 10. A lot of reading tonight. We're going to read through verse 20 here. Genesis 12, beginning with verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it came to pass, when he was close to entering Egypt, that he said to Sarai, his wife, Indeed, I know that you are a woman of beauty, of beautiful countenance. Therefore, if it will happen, when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, This is his wife, and they will kill me. Now notice this. Notice where the focus is. They're going to kill me. This is what's going to happen to me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me. It's all about me, for your sake, and that I may live because of you. So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful, and the princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house, and he treated Abram well for her sake. And he had sheep and oxen, male donkeys, male female servants, female donkeys, and camels. Verse 17, but the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you've done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? Notice this, I might have taken her as my wife. This is something that stood out to me in this text that maybe I guess I've never really seen before, but the morality here. You have a polytheistic kingdom and ruler here that is concerned with committing adultery. And that really kind of came across in a very unusual way to me, because Abraham is a polygamist. And yet Pharaoh was too, but I guess there was considered in their mind a difference between polygamy with just any woman and taking someone else's wife. And so, yeah, that's, I guess, where they drew the line. But anyway, Pharaoh's concerned about this. I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. And so, instead of just putting their trust in God, I can't even begin to imagine the beauty of Sarai. You know, to be so concerned to actually be going into a country where it's an entire kingdom, and to say, she is so beautiful, I'm concerned that the Pharaoh, that the king of the entire nation, is going to take you away from me. And sure enough, she was so beautiful that that's exactly what would have happened. Well, I don't know if it would have happened, but he did take her, not knowing that she was married. She must have been something else to look at, you know. But just fearing that this would happen, instead of going to God in prayer and asking God, begging God, please God, help us in this situation, instead they jump the gun and they try to take control. And in doing so, you have the father of the faithful telling lies. Now, I don't know about you, but I actually like that the Word of God actually shows the faults and the sins of its heroes. We know that it does with a lot of them. Well, Abraham was a liar a couple of different times. This actually happened a couple of different times. And yet he was the father of the faithful. We're all human, right? We all make mistakes. All right, let's go to chapter 16. And this is the second time that they let their ego, their control problems, begin to edge God out, if you will, and take matters into their own hands. Genesis chapter 16, we're going to begin at the very beginning of that chapter. Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarah said to Abram, see now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Notice who she blames for this. Please go into my maid, perhaps I shall obtain children by her. And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. So, one of the first things we learned here is you don't listen to your wife. Because you see what happens as a result of this. But anyway, she's desperate, obviously. And so he listens to her. And maybe you could call him a smart man for this, right? We'll call him a smart man because he's listening to his wife. Verse 3, then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife. After Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, so he went in to Hagar and said, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Then Sarai said to Abram, my wrong be upon you. I blame you. I want you to do this wrong because we need a child, and it's a shame I don't have a child, and now it's going wrong. And she says, it's your fault, Abraham. Why did you listen to me? You know I didn't mean that. My wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me. Verse 6, so Abram said to Sarai, indeed your maid is in your hand, do to her as you please. And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence. Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. Verse 9, the angel of the Lord, possibly pre-incarnate Jesus, said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly so that they shall not be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. But then notice this. So he's saying it's okay. You need to go back. You need to go back to your servant, and you're going to have a child. And this is probably Jesus, and we've done studies on that, the angel of the Lord before. But it's almost like a little bit of a punishment here. You know, I'm going to bless you, but since you jumped the gun, took matters into your own hands, and committed sin, this is the consequences of verse 12. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees. For she said, have I also here seen him who sees me? That's unusual to say. Verse 14, therefore the well was called, talk about unusual to say, Bir Lahai, I don't know. You can see it for yourself. I'm not going to try to pronounce that again. Observe, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Whew, that's a lot of reading. So the covenant God made with Abraham and his descendants was the promised seed that was fulfilled later on, Galatians chapter 3, verse 16, that through his seed, through his lineage, all nations of the earth will be blessed. Of course, talking about Jesus and the promised land that I will give to your descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey, and that I will make of your descendants a great nation. Notice two of those are about what? About having children. And here, years and years and years later have gone by, time has passed by, and 99, wasn't she 99 at this time? 99 years old, and she still has not had a child. And so she took matters into her own hand. Notice in verse 2, so Sarai said to Abram, see now the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go into my maidservant, perhaps I shall obtain children by her, because it was not in her time period that she thought that it was supposed to happen. She took matters into her own hand. Good point of application, because I've been there and done that, and you probably have as well. When I think things are supposed to play out in my life a certain way during a certain amount of time, and they have not, sometimes I want to jump the gun. And that's exactly what she is doing. Notice verse 2 here. Notice the wording. So this is the New King James, perhaps. I think there is a translation that says maybe, but I didn't look at all the different translations. Perhaps, maybe. She didn't even know what God wanted here. Perhaps, maybe this is God's will. She had no earthly idea. In fact, I think she knew that it wasn't God's will, but because it was supposed to happen through Sarah, and this way it would not happen through Sarah. So it's obviously not God's will, but she's grasping. She's trying to find a way to make something that she really desires to happen work, because it's an embarrassment to her, a shame on her to not have a child in that day and time. Here I am, and I'm old as I can be, still haven't had this child. I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe this is how God, maybe, just maybe, this is how God's going to bring it about, through another woman. And that's not the case. So she jumps the gun and she takes matters into her own hands. And now just look through the text and look at all the problems that come about. You have their marriage. She literally gives another woman to Abraham or Abram, and he has, of course, relations with her and all kinds. I mean, I don't have to tell you how much problem there would be. I can't imagine when you allow something like that to happen. So she has marital problems, and then you have hatred and despise. Her maidservant despises her now. You have the abuse. It says that Sarah dealt harshly with her. Because of this, you have this tension between them. So she dealt harshly with her. You have Ishmael that is born, and he's a violent man, it says. And then we have, of course, as a result, we have had fighting ever since amongst those people. I've heard some people ask, why in the world is it like that over? What, are the people crazy? That they just like fighting? Well, God said it would always be like that, did he not? That's exactly why. I mean, there's other things that are tied in with that, not to go into the history of all of it. This is the root of all the problem, is all because somebody, God's will did not happen in their time frame, and so they had to take control because of their ego, edge God out, and as a result you have literally thousands of years of war because of that. And I can't even begin to talk about all the problems that came about because of this. So, lesson learned, don't edge God out. Don't take matters into your own hands. Put your trust in God. So looking at some application here, some questions to ask ourselves to see whether or not we're doing this. Number one, what or who am I trying to control, and is it really all that important? Be honest with yourself. What am I trying to control? Is it really all that important? Because a lot of times it's not. Going back to Luke chapter 10, you see Mary and Martha there, and you see Jesus coming to Martha's house, and that about every bit of that. And Martha, is upset because Mary is sitting at the feet of the Lord, but she is in control of the situation. I want the house clean, and I want to make sure that he's served properly and all of that. And she's stressing out because she's not in control of the situation. Everything's not done the way she thinks it should be done. And by the way, my sister is not helping me a bit. Make her help me is what she asked Jesus to do. And Jesus says, Martha, 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 Mary has chosen the better part here. Basically, calm down. Calm down. Don't feel like you've got to be in control of absolutely everything. Second question, is it mine to control? That is, okay. I think I changed that PowerPoint. Is it mine to control? There are situations that we stress out about that we try to control and we have absolutely no control over. Jotted down a few. Finances. Anybody ever stress about finances? I'll be the first to raise my hand. Absolutely. Do I have any control over that? Yes, I do. I do have some control over that. I can make a budget. Do you know how to budget? Mom and Dad taught me to budget a long time ago. I can budget. I can cut credit cards if that's kind of out of control, and I've given in to that. So yes, there are things that I can do about that. Another one I wrote down is marriage problems. Is that in my control? Can be. There are things that I can do. Can I do anything about that? I can pray for my spouse and about our marriage. I can seek counseling. There are some things that I can do. Can I control that person, my spouse? Absolutely not. Can I make them be the spouse that they should be? No, I need to focus in on myself and how, if I'm being that kind of spouse. What about sickness? That's a big one. Can I control sickness? No, I can't. A loved one who is sick, who is dealing with a disease, who's taking treatments for something, and that stresses you to no end because you love that person and you hate to see them go through all of that, do I have any control over that? No, I don't. And so what do? I turn it over to God. I do a whole lot of praying about it, and I help them out all that I can. That's all I can do. Try my best not to stress about it. Certainly don't try to be in control of the situation. What about people I love? Children. Children that are not living right can stress you out to no end. And that bears on your mind, and that stresses you, and that worries you. But here's the thing, and I'm not saying it's not going to be on your mind, but do you really have any control over that? What can you do? You can pray for them once again, can't you? You can encourage them. And maybe you have their entire life. Don't give up in doing that. You can encourage them, you can pray for them, but ultimately you have absolutely no control over what they do. And so we need to let that control go. Philippians chapter 4, 6, and 7, the third question, is it for God alone? Is it for God alone? Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, be anxious or worry about nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. If I'm not experiencing that peace of whatever it is that's stressing me out, and I'm going to God in prayer, but I'm not experiencing that peace, it might be because I'm not letting go of it enough. It's hard to do. I know it's easier said than done, but it's hard to do. But this is a promise. And it's something that you've probably experienced. It's something that I have experienced. And I would dare say if you're not experiencing that peace, then you're not completely releasing control and giving that over to God. You've got to give that to the Lord. Did Abraham learn his lesson? Didn't he? How did he learn his lesson? You remember what he did. As he has Isaac, his son, laying there on an altar. Why? Because God told him to do that. Has no idea what God has in store, has no idea what in the world he's going to do, but he knows what God has told him to do, and so he's willing to do that even if it means sacrificing his own son. I would say that Abraham learned his lesson and was stopped as he had the knife up about to take his life. Abraham learned to give God control because God does know what's best. So the question is, have I learned that? Have I learned that in my life? You don't have to see the outcome to trust in God. That's why it's called faith. To walk by faith, to live by faith. God knows all things, and God desires the very, very best for us. Put your faith in Him. Release that control to Him. If there's anything we can do tonight to help you to have a closer walk with God, won't you let us know while together we stand and sing?